I thought for the classes that we have between Pesach and Shavuos, that we could learn a little bit about Pirkei Avos, because we learn Pirkei Avos specifically between Pesach and Shavuos. We continue learning it throughout the summer, but the first cycle is between Pesach and Shavuos. So it's a good time to learn about Pirkei Avos. In general, why do we learn Pirkei Avos during this time? So there's a number of reasons that are given. So Pirkei Avos in general talks about, and we're going to discuss this a little bit further in a minute, but what is Pirkei Avos? So it's the way we translate it is ethics of the fathers. But basically it's a lot more of like, it's a very, it's full of a very human discussion, right? Giving us direction, but on like a very human level. Not included in like the Bar Kanura, who's one of the commentators. He explains that these are teachings that are not like mitzvahs, right? They're not part of the mitzvahs. It's not like, yes, there are certain mitzvahs that deal with things on like an ethical, moral level, right? And we have mitzvahs of like not coveting something else as part of the Aseres HaDibros, right? So that's sort of like a moral standard. Or there are mitzvahs about relationships between people that are sort of like moral ethical discussions. But this is almost like ethical advice, and this is why one of the reasons it's called Pirkei Avos, that like a father gives to his child, right? What does that mean? It's like, this is what a parent tells their child, like, this is how you be a mensch, right? It has less with maybe not so much about being a good Jew, even though it obviously leads into that and it's foundational before that, right? But it's about being a mensch, being a good person. And we're studying it during this time because we're leading up to Matan Torah. And as this, I think this is something that we see sometimes, is that there are people who are very focused on being good Jews and sometimes lose their way and lose their vision, and the mensch part becomes less important, right? And we're emphasizing over here by studying this before receiving the Torah is, first you have to be a mensch. First you have to be a good person. Then you can be a good Torah Jew, right? Torah comes upon this basis of being a mensch, being a good person. Other reasons that are given that we learned during this time is an interesting one that I just saw recently, is that apparently like this is like the beginning of the summer season. And during the summer, it says that like our taivas are increased. Like it's a time when we have more, I guess, pull towards negative things, maybe because, when it was so cold, people were just surviving and you stay home, versus when it's nice and warm, you go out, you have a later night, you can have a party, whatever it is, right? So like there's more of an energy of desire during the summer. So we sort of prep ourselves by learning these ethical laws to sort of armor ourselves before the summer season. I just thought that was interesting. It was the first time I saw that. But yeah, so these are some of the reasons that we learn Pirkei Avos. So what we're going to explore today is, before we learn, is actually not Pirkei Avos, but we're going to tie it back into. So every week before we learn, every Shabbos before we start learning Pirkei Avos, we say a Mishnah, right? We say a Mishnah. The Mishnah that we say before we open up Pirkei Avos every single week is actually not from Pirkei Avos. It's a Mishnah from Sanhedrin. And the Mishnah goes like this. I'm sure we're all familiar with it. Kol Yisrael, every Jew, yesh lahem chelak la'olam haba, has a share in the world to come. Shenemar, as it says, and it's quoting, I think, Yeshaya. V'amech kulam tzadikim, your nation is all righteous. Your nation is all tzadikim. La'elam yershu aretz, they will inherit the land forever. Netzar matai, they are the branch of my planting. Maseyadai, the work of my hand. Lehispa'er, so that I can be glorified. So it says every Jew has a portion in the world to come. And why is it that every Jew has a portion in the world to come? because your entire nation is tzaddikim. Your entire nation is righteous. Therefore, someone who's righteous deserves a reward. And what is that reward? That reward is the world to come, right? So why do we say this every week before we start saying Pirkei Avos? It's not a Mishnah from Pirkei Avos, it's a Mishnah from Sanhedrin. There must be some relationship between this concept of every Jew getting the reward in Elam Haba to the ideas that we're speaking about in Pirkei Avos, right? It must have some sort of connection if we're reading it every week before. So what's the connection between this concept of Elam Haba and of every Jew having a place in Elam Haba? Every Jew being essentially a tzaddik and therefore worthy of reward, right? How does this play out? So in order to understand this, we're going to take a step back for a second, and we're going to go back to a discussion that we opened up with about Pirkei Avos in general. Why is it that we learn Pirkei Avos, right? So we said that Pirkei Avos is a moral code. Now, who needs a moral code? Who needs lessons on being a mensch? When does the father give the son the lesson about this is how you are a mensch? When he sees that the child is maybe not being so kind to somebody else, right? That's when you will give them the lesson, right? So it's only the reason that we need these reminders of how to be a good person, how to be a mensch. The reason why we need a moral code is because we are human beings that are pulled in many directions, right? We're human beings, we have positive side and we have a negative side. And the reason we need that moral code is because we have that negative side to us, right? The more animalistic side that we have needs that anchoring, needs that reminding that, no, you can transcend. You can be more than just your animal self. You can be a good human being, right? You can be a person who acts like a mensch, right? That's sort of what we're implying when we say be a mensch. Be a person as opposed to something that's a little less than a person, right? Like we have this expectation of a person that a person acts in a kind and caring way to other people, right? As opposed to an animal that has more about its own self-interest. But when we're teaching someone how to be a mensch, we're teaching it to them because we obviously have animal impulses as well, right? That's why we need the reminder that, oh, you're a human being. So even though you have the animal impulse, right, you're still a human being. But who are we talking to right now? Who are we teaching this to? We're teaching this to the animal impulse, right? Does that make sense? If the person is acting purely in their human side, they don't need the teaching because the human side is naturally should be, caring for other people. It's the animal side that needs that reminder, hey, you're a person, right? And a person is kind to someone else, is able to see someone else's perspective. The person has empathy, et cetera, right? So these guidelines are sort of talking to our more animal side, right? So that is what we're learning in Pirkei Avos. So the Pirkei Avos is talking to our lower self, right? And this is, like we said before, this is brought by the Bartanura. He explains on the whole concept of Pirkei Avos. And again, this is a guideline for us so that we can sort of elevate ourselves. And this is just for like any human being on their on their lowest levels to be able to elevate themselves. On the other hand, it says, what's interesting is that it says that if you follow Pirkei Avos, you're going to be a chassid. What is a chassid? A chassid is someone, this is not talking about a chassid in like the sociological sense that we use the word today. A chassid, in the words of the times of the Mishnah or the Gemara, is someone who is lifnei mishur and goes above and beyond the letter of the law, right? So that kind of seems to be contradictory. Either I'm saying that these are like the basic things that you need to be a mensch, or we're saying, oh, this is how someone goes beyond the letter of the law. So which one is it? Are we just being a mensch, or are we reaching above and going beyond? Right? Is it like the baseline? This is how you need to act just to be a good person, or is this how you act to like be exceptional? Does that make sense? The question, right? And then as we another like something else that we mentioned, we're learning this during Sphira, right? And like we said before, why are we learning it during this time? Because this is a time of temptation, right? If this is a time of temptation, that means that I'm speaking to people who are tempted, right? Another reason we're learning during Sphira is because this is a time when we're focusing on our animal self, right? And we're working on that transformation of the animal self into a better person, right? At the same time, we also know that this is something that all Jews do, whether you're a good person or a less good person. If you could be a tzaddik and you're still going to learn Pirkei Avos, right? So are we speaking to the animal or are we speaking to the tzaddik? Like who are we talking to over here? What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve over here? Are we trying to achieve baseline human or are we trying to achieve exceptional human? Right? So to address this, we're going to go back to this idea of Kol Yisrael Yesam Chelek Olam Haba, right? Because we said this needs to have some sort of relationship with the whole context, with the whole content of Pirkei Avos, if we're saying it every week before we start, right? So we're going to go into this whole concept of Kol Yisrael Yesam Chelek Olam Haba. Now, this, you can have a very lengthy discussion on this in Sanhedrin. We would talk about this because we're talking about Pirkei Avos. We're not going to get into all the details of this. There are sichos up there about this. There's a whole debate. In general, there's a debate. When it says Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek Olam Haba, what is it referring to? What is this Olam Haba that it's referring to? The world Haba. You think about Gan Eden, right? This world is the world right now, and the next world is the spiritual life of Gan Eden, right? And that's a lot of times when we're talking about Olam Haba, you go to Shir and someone mentions Olam Haba, that's what they're referring to. They're referring to Gan Eden. But in this case, after a lot of debate, the consensus, there are still disagreements, but the consensus, at least that Chassidus goes with, is that this case, Olam Haba is not referring to Gan Eden, but it's actually referring to the world to come, as in the world that's going to come after this world, which is the world of Techiyas HaMesim, right? We have the world as it is right now. The world as it is right now, we have spiritual and physical. Spirituality is infinite, right? That means that even after a person dies, what happens to their soul? It continues living. And where does it go? It goes to Gan Eden, but that's still part of this world. It's just the spiritual dimension of this world, right? And in Gan Eden, the soul is still living. The body is no longer alive. The body is finite, right? But in the world to come, after this world is done, right? When Mashiach comes, we're going to have an entirely new world. And in this entirely new world, it's not going to be that the spiritual is infinite and the physical is finite. It's going to be that both the spiritual and the physical are going to live on, right? The bodies come back to life and the bodies themselves become infinite as well, right? The bodies themselves become something that go on and on and on, right? And that is the world to come. The world to come is this reward for not only the soul, it's a reward for the entire person, the body and the soul. And this pasuk, this Mishnah, of Kol Yisrael Yesh Lahem Chelek Olam Haba, that every Jew has a portion in Olam Haba, is referring to that world of Techiyas HaMesim. Because we know Gan Eden, does every Jew actually have a portion of Gan Eden? It says that there are people, that there are certain sins that, like Chayav Kares, right? Where what does being cut off mean? That maybe the person cannot go into Gan Eden, right? Doesn't mean their soul dies, but it's sort of in this limbo state or whatever, right? That doesn't have access to Gan Eden. And even in Gan Eden, what do we know about Gan Eden? Like after a person passes away, we continue doing things in their merit. Why? Because in Gan Eden itself, there are levels and levels and levels. It's not like an equal place where all the souls go up and are hanging out in Gan Eden. There are levels and levels and levels of revelation that the soul experiences in Gan Eden, which is enormous, just bliss, and it's an amazing reward for the soul. It's like the soul's in its happy place, right? But it can go higher and it can go higher and it can go higher. So one person passes away and they enter on this level. This is their entry level, and then they can go up and up and up. And then if the with the merits of the people who they've left behind, the things that are continuing on earth, they get the merit to keep on going up. And then there are souls that enter in on a different level, right? So Gan Eden is not something that's equal for everybody. And we learn that the reason Gan Eden is not equal for everybody is because Gan Eden is actually, what is the reward of Gan Eden? Gan Eden is the reward for learning Torah. Okay, so learning Torah, when you learn Torah, you earn the merit of Gan Eden. Now, learning Torah the way we earn merits for learning Torah can be in different ways. Sometimes the way we earn merits for learning Torah is through enabling other people to learn Torah, right? Sometimes the way we earn merits for learning Torah is through our own Torah learning, through teaching others, et cetera, right? Like all those things that are involved in Torah learning, that's how we earn our points for Gan Eden. And the reality is that when it comes to learning Torah, not everybody's potential is equal, right? There are some people, this is just like a fact of life, there are some people who have a greater capacity for learning than other people. There are some people who have a greater capacity maybe just for focus. So if you have a greater capacity for focus, you can sit and learn longer. If you can sit and learn longer, that means you'll learn more, right? If your capacity for focus is not very great, then you're not going to be able to learn very much, right? There are some people who have a greater, whose minds have more depth, right? So that means that they can go deeper into an idea, deeper and deeper, and they'll have deeper understanding than another person, right? There are some people who have better memories. That means they'll remember what they learned much better, and through remembering what they learned, they're able to cover more ground, et cetera, right? So we know that not everyone is equal in their ability to learn Torah, right? And whether that's fair or not fair, that could be discussed, right? But at the end of the day, the reward, therefore, is not going to be equal because not everyone is equal, right? So it's obviously, it's Hashem judges the person based on their capabilities, right? But at the same time, being that, see, the way it works is that the reward, what is the reward of Gan Eden? The reward of Gan Eden is revelation. So a soul with greater capacity can experience greater revelation. It's more of a vessel for greater revelation. So it's not anyone's fault or whatever, but there are certain souls that are just automatically built. It's like there are certain souls that are automatically built to receive greater, and it's but even we're still talking about, like, this is, I think, a valid point. Like, why create the system where so the soul is getting what it needs at its level, but there are going to be different capacities, right? When it comes to Tchias HaMesim, which we said is the reward that we're referring to when we say Elam Haba, that every single person has a share. So that's Tchias HaMesim, right? Tchias HaMesim is our reward not for learning Torah, but for doing mitzvahs. And when it comes to doing mitzvahs, and we're talking here purely in the world of action, right? Not in the world of intention, in the world of action. In the world of action, everybody is equal, right? Everyone has the same capacity to do as somebody else. Maybe there are certain things, for example, men and women, we have different obligations and mitzvahs, right? But as a general, like, it doesn't mean that a man, when they pass away, they'll have done more mitzvahs. They just might be different mitzvahs than a woman has done, right? And it says, not just in the world of, like, potential, that we can potentially, we can do as many mitzvahs as we want to do, right? Not just that. Because technically, you could do as many mitzvahs as you want to do. You could fill your entire day with just doing mitzvahs the whole day, right? From morning to night, if you have the time, right? Like, you could just do mitzvahs the whole day. And even within our jobs, you can do a mitzvah. You get stuck here, you're kind to a person here. You're like, there's just anything you can do. It says that even in Russia, even the Pirkei Yisrael are full of mitzvahs like a woman, right? That's one of the things that's why we eat the pomegranate on Rosh Hashanah, is to remind God that we're full of mitzvahs. Even someone who's a sinner, you can't help yourself. Whether you know it or not, you're going to be doing mitzvahs, right? There are endless opportunities to take this world and transform it, because we're constantly interacting with the physical world, which is the realm in which we do mitzvahs, right? We do mitzvahs in the physical world. It's a physical action. We're not talking about intention here. In intention, there might be differences, right? But in the realm of action, everyone has access to doing mitzvahs, and everyone does mitzvahs. And Tchias HaMesim, what's the difference between Tchias HaMesim and Elam Haba? Elam Haba, the soul is receiving revelation, but it's only the soul. Tchias HaMesim is a reward for both the body and the soul, right? So because it's a reward for both the body and the soul, all these mitzvahs that we're doing with our bodies, all these mitzvahs that we're doing with our bodies, we are all going to get reward for that in the world of Tchias HaMeisim. And there's no person who does not do mitzvahs. An interesting thing to think about is this. What is like our point? What is the point? Why do we do mitzvahs? Why did God create all these mitzvahs? Because the point is that we're supposed to transform the world into a place of godliness, right? The world is a very physical place. And when we do a mitzvah, we are taking that physical item that we're using and we're revealing its source. We're revealing its spiritual source, right? And that means I'm revealing God in this mitzvah. So if I make a bracha on some food, I'm revealing that this food has a godly source. If I even like learning Torah on this table, now I'm revealing that this table was created with a purpose, right? This piece of plastic, I guess, and metal is created with some sort of purpose. It has some sort of purpose, transforming it into something that has a spiritual purpose. And so on a certain level, you can say, right, we said different people are born with different capacities, right? And different people, some people are born naturally better maybe than other people. Someone who's born with a very coarse animal side, right? A very strong, raging animal side. Hindi was discussing this last week, right? That there are different types of nefesh habahamis. That, you know, some people's nefesh habahamis is a little bit more overwhelming than other people. It's not through their fault. Just that's the way God created them. Over there, because we're saying the whole point is transformation, the potential for transformation over there is huge, right? So we're not scared of the physical when it comes to doing a mitzvah. If something is very densely physical, that means that there's so much more opportunity to reveal more and more godliness in it, right? There's layers on layers of opportunity to reveal godliness in this person, or if, again, someone who's interacting with the world so much, right? The person who's a businessman and he's not learning Torah the whole day, he has opportunity to do many more mitzvahs than the person who's learning Torah, right? Physical mitzvahs. He has the opportunity to do many more, right? So everyone has this access into this world of mitzvahs, and therefore everyone receives the reward of Elam Haba. And let's take it a step further, right? Elam Haba, you would think, so we could step back and we would say, okay, so which one? Torah mitzvahs, we've discussed this idea before, but we're gonna bring it up again. Which one of these, learning Torah or doing mitzvahs, is a higher level of connecting with God? Well, you're saying that because we've discussed it, right? Right. It is connecting to God, but you could say on a certain level we're channeling Hashem's energy into our brains also. When we're learning Torah, we're thinking God's thoughts, like Torah, Dalet Hey of Tanya. But when we learn Torah, you can say a person's whole self is involved, right? Your personality is involved. You're using your brain, you're processing it through your own self. It requires, on a certain level, it requires a lot more work to learn Torah. It's harder. It's harder because it's involving my brain. It's not just the physical action, right? And things that involved our kavanah. That this is why it's so difficult to have kavanah, because it means that I need to immerse my entire self into this moment, right? Which is very hard for most of us to really like let go of all the distractions around us, to invest ourselves emotionally into it, to invest our brains into it. It's very, very hard. And it's also a lot more sophisticated, right? It's a lot more sophisticated to be able to use my brain to connect with God, to be able to feel something for God. This all happens as a result of Torah study. And the advantage to that is that it can also refuel your doing mitzvahs. Because if you have absolutely no emotional or intellectual connection to it, it can start to become a drag to sort of put a mitzvah before something else that I want to do, right? So this is why we're not going to say, oh, just totally neglect your insides and become a person who works by rote and just does mitzvahs because that's what God wants you to do, right? We do say that you should invest yourself in learning Torah. I mean, I think we've probably all experienced how much more enjoyable doing a mitzvah is when we've learned about it, when we understand it. How much more enjoyable going into a Yom Tov is when we've spent time trying to understand it. In general, when we're in a Torah learning space, when we're in a Torah learning headspace, it's 9 times out of 10 more likely that it's going to enhance your observance, right? It's going to enhance your mitzvah performance, right? But what do we see? We see that which reward, but what happens, right? So lots of people, there are a lot of souls in Gan Eden right now, right? A lot of very big tzaddikim passed away. Their souls are in Gan Eden right now. They're in an incredible rapturous space of basking in God's holiness, right? What's going to happen once Tchias Mason happens, right? Let's say today, Tchias Mason is going to happen. What's going to happen? Oh, souls, come back. We're heralding you back down. You're coming back down into this world, right? You're going back into your bodies. And the souls are experiencing the freedom from their bodies, which for the soul is something that it's enjoying, right? It's not being hampered down by the body, which doesn't see things maybe the same way that it does, right? And it's able to express itself when it's in the body is usually louder, right? It's more accessible to the person. It's a louder voice. When it's in heaven, it's the only voice, right? And so we're saying, oh, come back down into the body. That seems kind of not so exciting, right? Like, oh, this is my next stage of my reward, is going back down into the body. We usually think of Tchias Mason from like the perspective of the people who are still left on earth. So the people who are still left on earth, we see Tchias Mason as a reward. Why? Because you're reunited with someone maybe who you've lost or something like that, right? So like from the perspective, oh yeah, that's the beauty of Tchias Mason. But no, we're saying Tchias Mason is amazing for the soul too, right? So what is this amazingness for the soul? So it's coming back down into the body. But the new body that it's coming back down into is, like we said before, right now, what are our bodies? Our bodies are finite, right? They're self-centered. That's the role of the body, is just to keep itself alive, right? And it should. we should be taking care of ourselves, keeping ourselves alive. That's sort of where the body is focused. And it needs to be that way, because what's going to happen to it? Like the natural state of the body is that, let's be a little bit, frank here, is that the body's in a natural state of decay, right? Like it's just like, it doesn't really improve with age, right? At a certain point, it stops improving with age, right? And that's just the reality. And so the soul is improving with age, right? The soul is getting stronger, getting smarter, getting more kind, like learning how to express itself stronger, but the body is not. That's how it is right now. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Because what did we say? All this work of doing mitzvahs, what is our goal? Our goal is to transform this earth and to show how this world is actually an expression of God. Like we said earlier, what do we say in Kol Yisrael Yisrael Chiluk Olam Haba? It says, the Amich Kulam Tzadikim, your nation is all Tzadikim, La'aylam Yirshu Aretz, they will inhabit the earth forever, right? It's not just our souls that will inhabit the earth forever, it's our bodies. Our bodies are going to take on this infinite sense. Why? Nezer Matai, because they are the branch of my planting. Maaseh Yadai, they are the work of my hand. The point is that when we recognize that this physical world is the work of God's hand, when we recognize that this physical world is expression of godliness, what happens when the entire world becomes obvious to us, becomes transparent to the energy that's pulsing within it, right? When the world becomes transparent to the energy that's within it, then we see that that energy is godly. And then what happens to the physical world is that it too becomes infinite. So the only reason the physical world is not infinite is because in its current state, what is it? It's klipa, it hides God, right? So because it's hiding God, that's where the potential for death comes in when we're hiding God. Because does God have potential for death? No, Hashem is just that Hashem is just infinitely life, right? That is what God is, true life. So it's only because we're hiding God, and that's the things that make us feel like ourselves, right? And that's where we sort of feel very good about ourselves, is sometimes in this element of death instead of in this element of life. But after we go through the whole process of doing all the mitzvahs, flooding the world with God's light, and then Hashem brings Mashiach, makes that obvious, makes that apparent, that we've flooded this entire world with this godly energy. And now it's totally transparent to what is within it. I've worked on my body, and I've created a body that is now transparent to what is within it. Then the body too becomes infinite. That is the reward for us revealing God in this physical world, is that God reveals that that's actually the truth, right? Hashem revealed that that is actually true. Yes, I am actually, why did I create this physical world? Why did I create your body? I created this body to be Maseh Yadai. I created this body to be the work of my hand. And therefore, when I'm going to show you, because you did the work and you showed that you're doing a mitzvah with your body, you're doing a mitzvah with the world, and in that action, you said, I see it, right? I see that there's God here. I see there's potential for infinite life here. Hashem then rewards us with that infinite life. And that is what Tchias HaMesim is. It's that infinite light in body, and we see it's higher even than Olam Haba, right? It must be higher because we're taking the soul out of Olam Haba to bring it in, out of Gan Eden to bring it into Olam Haba, to bring it back into the body, because that is the ultimate reward and really the ultimate goal. That is why Hashem, the intention of creation is in Tchias HaMesim. And it's right, and this is an idea that we've discussed also a number of times, this whole idea of that this being, God's ultimate goal is to be down here in this world, right? And again, back to this point, like in the world of revelation, in this world that we're living in right now, we see that there's differences between everybody. There are different levels. Every person has their own capacities. Essential level where we exist essentially, where God created us. Maseh Yadai, you're the work of my hand, where God created us with the intention that you're going to transform this world and you're going to express the potential of this world, then we're all the same, right? On that, at the essential core, we're all the same, and therefore we all have the potential to do a mitzvah. Every person can do a mitzvah. Any person can do a mitzvah. It doesn't matter if you're a better person or a worse person, you can do the mitzvah. And you're achieving the exact same thing when you're doing the mitzvah. You don't achieve more by doing a mitzvah, being a tzaddik, than being a rasha, right? You're not achieving more. And bringing this back to this whole idea, we said that we say this every day before we're saying, every week before we start saying Pirkei Avos on Shabbos, right? We say this Mishnah of Kol Yisrael Yishlem Kev Elam Haba. Because what did we say Pirkei Avos is? Pirkei Avos is about engaging with the less good parts of ourselves, right? It's about engaging with the less good parts of ourselves and recognizing that there are some not such good parts of myself, and I need to turn myself into a mensch. I need to turn my animal into a mensch, right? What empowers us to be able to do this? What empowers us to be able to transform our animal into a mensch? What empowers us to engage with our physical self is this knowledge that you are the work of God, right? You are Hashem's, you have this power for Tchias HaMesim. You will one day, your body and soul will one day both be infinite. Your body will one day be fully transformed, right? And that knowledge, that's living with that knowledge of Tchias HaMesim can inspire us even right now in this uncompleted state, right? In this sort of coarser state where we are right now, we can use that knowledge that I am someone who will have Tchias HaMesim. That means that I am someone who has the potential to be a fully godly person. And every single Jew has this. You don't have any excuse. Kol Yisrael. Every single Jew has this within them. This. What is our essential self? Our essential self is this fact that my body and soul can be completely and totally united and expressing godliness. And on that level, we're all the same. And we use that knowledge when we're engaging with the world, when we're engaging with the less pleasant parts of ourselves. We use that knowledge that we are at our core people who can become absolutely and totally synchronized with God, and we will one day be absolutely and totally synchronized with God to fuel this work that we're doing right now to be a mensch, right? Because without that knowledge, you can say, oh, I can never actually do it. My animal side is too strong. My animal side is too coarse, right? I'm sort of stuck in a negative space, so I can't become a better person. But we're saying, no, your animal side will one day be infinite. You have this power, and you can you can access that power now to become a better person right now. And that also answers our question of who is Pirkei Avos for? Is it for the lower person, or is it for the person who's a chassid, right? And the point is that we have this infinite power. What are we accessing? We're going back to this idea that it's this infinite power. On this level of this infinite power, we're all, like we said before, we're all the same, right? So for each of us, we can access that energy to meet us at the level that we're at, right? Now, obviously, so the tzaddik is going into Pirkei Avos maybe with different goals than the lower person, right? Than the person, we maybe have different places where we're working at, but we're both accessing that same exact power, which is this power of Kal Yisrael Yeshem Olam Haba. That is the power that we're accessing to enable us to work on our more physical selves during this time, right? And just the last point that we see, that it's specifically through doing these actions and dealing with the world that it says that we are the work of God's hand, that we're created to glorify Him, to make this world a more beautiful place, right? To make this world a better place. And this is the action that we're doing during this time when we're trying to focus on our more animal side, during this time that we're trying to focus on finding ourselves and becoming a better person. We are doing it for the sake that we are glorifying God. So we're not just doing it for ourselves to become better people, but we're doing it to glorify Hashem, which means through doing this work, I am becoming an expression of God. Through working on myself, I become less, when someone looks at me, they see less me and they see more reflection of Hashem, right? And that's really our ultimate goal in this time, and leads to the preparation that we can receive the Torah on a whole new level that we haven't received it last year. So yeah, we should all be empowered to recognize the infinity of our bodies and the power that gives us to be able to transform ourselves in a very real way.